Hello and welcome back, Camporee 2020. We trust you all had a nice lunch, Avatar adventure time, maybe even a Sabbath nap in there. And we're so glad that you've rejoined us for this afternoon's programming. Soon we're going to begin something that we're all really excited about, our panel discussion, which is titled Mental Remix Stress 101, where we're going to have an open conversation about the stress that we can experience as young people in today's world and how to manage it and care for our mental health, which is something that is so vitally important. But before we do that, we are going to check in with our PUC Pioneer Camping crew, who I believe are going to reveal how our latest poll ended up, which I'm excited to see. So let's send it back now to Angel, Judith, Kenzie, and Nick.
What up, Pathfinders? You guys wanted us to do a hammock stack, so here we are. Angel's still settling in on the top, and then Nick's gonna try to make his way up, and then Kenzie will get to go, and then I'll be getting at the bottom. So let's do this.
Woohoo! Oh. Go Judith. Yeah.
Woo!
Woo! Oh, well, this was tons of fun. Thanks for choosing this, guys.
I think I just discovered my new favorite sport. I am so glad that you all chose that because I had never seen that before, and I definitely want to try it myself, though it seems that it takes some skill. So that was neat. Thank you, PUC Pioneer Camping crew. We're going to get to check in with them again later around dinner time, I believe. But right now, we're going to shift into our panel discussion. Mental Remix, Stress 101. And before I introduce our panel, I would like to thank those of you who submitted questions, which have helped guide our conversation today, and thank all of you who have been interacting with us throughout our camporee. We continue to invite your participation. I want to let you know that this conversation will touch on some pretty important and even serious things. And so we ask you to handle these topics with the consideration and respect that they deserve, which I think will truly benefit all of us as we have this discussion. So thank you, everyone, for being a part of our conversation today. And I would like to introduce our three wonderful panelists now. They are all respected professionals in their fields who have taken time out of their Sabbath afternoons to be with us. And for that, we are truly very grateful. And so first, I would like to welcome Daniel Crespo Torres, who I'm just going to be calling Danny. Danny is a clinical therapist for a nonprofit called West End Family Counseling Services. So Danny, if you're with us, would love to know how long you've been doing that and what you do in that position.
Hey, Erin. So yes, I'm a clinical therapist. I mainly provide individual as well as group therapy to children, families, and older adults. So anything regarding their mental health, any issues around their community. I also do a lot of case management, which is connecting them to resources whenever they are in need of housing services, medical health services, anything related to the well-being and whole health of the person.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that work that you do. It sounds like a truly rewarding and important profession. Next up, I would like to introduce Jasmine Sajadi. Jasmine is an ISFC clinician for LA and Riverside County down here in Southern California. Now, ISFC, that stands for an Intensive Services Foster Care Therapist. Also, really wonderful work. So, Jasmine, can you tell us a little bit about that position and the young people that you work with?
Yeah, so similar to Danny, I provide individual therapy. I also provide family therapy. And the youth that I'm working with are primarily foster kids. So from the age of 5 up until the age of 18, sometimes around 21. But yeah, so I do therapy with them. I work with their families. But my main focus with them is working with them and their mental health and the experiences that they've had.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for joining us today as well. And our third panelist is Pastor Meshach Lee, who, of course, is a keynote speaker for the weekend. And I'm just going to speak for everyone when I say I have loved the messages so far. And thank you so much for providing the sermons that you have, and looking forward to your final message later today. Pastor Meshach, as we know, is the lead pastor at San Diego South Bay Church. He has also spent time as a youth pastor. And so, Pastor Meshach, how does being a pastor relate to mental health? It may sound like I'm asking why you're on this panel. I'm not. I'm happy you're on this panel, but would love to hear in your own words how being a pastor relates to this conversation of mental health.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Aaron, for the invite. Thank you for the opportunity just to share. Yeah, so how does that relate in regards to church and pastoral care? I think as a pastor, we're concerned about the whole person. It's taking in consideration this holistic approach to tend to the care of our members' needs, whether it's a physical, emotional, or mental, and above all, spiritual needs. All of those things intertwine with each other. You know, for example, if somebody's dealing with trauma, it has things to do with their stress levels or the emotional levels. Sometimes spiritual counseling can give them perspective. And also as a pastor, if we feel the need to, which oftentimes I do, because there's areas that I'm not very familiar with from a professional level, that I can guide and lead them and direct them to a place where they can find therapy, counseling, and ultimately our goal is healing, right? And so.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pastor, for that. We're going to be talking more about some of those subjects that you just brought up, but thank you to all of you for being part of this conversation. Pastor, one thing you didn't mention, but you have mentioned in your sermon, is that you're also a father of 5 boys, which I'm sure makes the conversation all the more relevant. And you are a living example of the transforming power of the gospel. And we're going to enjoy hearing more about that and hopefully hearing some of the personal experiences of each of our panelists. But I think that what you shared, Pastor, leads us to a great starting point in this conversation, which is simply why. I mean, why is it important that we talk about stress and mental health? Oftentimes it can be an uncomfortable topic or one that is not explored very often. So why is it important for our young people to have these conversations? Danny, do you mind starting us off with why it is that it's valuable to have this discussion?
Yes, of course. So I think it's extremely important to talk about, mention mental health, stress levels, just because as important as our physical health is, right? Going to the doctor on a yearly basis every 6 months, or when you go to the dentist to get your dental treatment done, it's very important that we're aware of our mental health, because physically and mentally we're very interconnected. So anything that has an impact on your mental health is ultimately going to have an impact on your physical, and vice versa. So being aware of things, triggers, experiences that we've had is extremely important for the overall well-being of every human. So yeah.
Well said. Anybody else, why you think it's valuable for us to be having this conversation about stress and mental health?
I feel just growing up, I never really spoke about that as a youth. It was almost as if it was taboo to talk about, mental illness, or even as a young man growing up, your emotional well-being was something you just kind of buried. And I think we're living in a day and age now where that is coming out to the surface, where these conversations needs to happen, needs to be open for discussion, so that, again, ultimately we can find wholeness with everybody else.
And in addition to, everything that's just been mentioned, I think it's important to note that mental health, it's important to address it, and it also looks very different for everyone. So our environment impacts our mental health, our genetics, the experiences that we have. And so it may not look for you what it looks like for someone else.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. It's not something that necessarily can be just discussed, an umbrella term, and just leave it there. And that's why conversation and dialogue is helpful. I was encouraged by something a year ago where during junior senior Bible camp, our juniors and seniors in academy, we do training with the leaders. And so this is 50 of our top academy student leaders, and we ask them to rank their interest in learning about and discussing 20 different topics that we presented. And they ranked how much they want to learn and discuss those. And mental health ranked second as far as what they want to discuss. And that was really encouraging, I think, to me as a pastor. And so with what all of you are saying, I think it's being backed up by young people realizing this is something to discuss. So I guess where I'd love to go now is, if we know it's important to talk about stress and mental health, what does this look like? What are some of the, if we're talking about stress, what are some of the physical or the somatic symptoms of stress? And you mentioned what you're doing in your field. And so Jasmine, I think if it's okay, we'll start with you. What are you seeing in your work with young people? And then if the others don't mind sharing as well, what you're seeing and what it looks like when we're stressed in an unhealthy way.
So stress is something that we all experience, right? And there are little forms of stress and big forms of stress. So little forms of stress, if you may have a test, or if you're stuck in traffic, or if your little sister or little brother is driving you crazy, you can get stressed out. But if bigger things in life are stressing us out and we're stressed for an extended period of time, that's when it kind of becomes unhealthy stress. And like I said, everyone can have different symptoms of stress, but some of the common ones are we have headaches, or our stomach gets upset, or our body aches, or we can't sleep. And so those are the, or your palms get sweaty, or heartbeat starts to pump, starts to go faster. And so these are some things our body might experience when we're stressed. And that's when, and I think we'll talk about it a little more, that's when we want to try and use tools to kind of bring ourselves back to our baseline functioning so that we can properly address what's going on or calm ourselves down.
I think, Aaron, from like a standpoint of dealing with young people in stress as far as church, I remember being a youth pastor, and it was a very common thing that young people were dealing with, whether it's stress at home, whether it's stress at school, or whether it was just stress in relationships. If anything, I probably dealt a lot with the relational part of, when young people are dating each other and, or there's a breakup and they're wondering if they're good enough, or if they're, if they're going to meet the expectations, those kind of different stress levels that dealing with as a youth pastor, and even now as a senior pastor, I get a few conversations with our young people in regards to that. And I think that spiritual counseling is just one part of that. So I'm grateful to have two other professionals who can deal with it on a holistic level, so that we're not just approaching it from a spiritual angle, but we want to use every resource that we can have to help our young people get through some of the most stressful times.
Just to add on to what Meshach and Jasmine said, very well said, I think it's also very important that whenever we're experiencing these levels of stress, we either, and like Jasmine said, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but find things that we really help us to kind of get to that space where we're experiencing peace or more calmness. Even if it's reaching out to a friend and letting them know, like, hey, I need a little bit of distraction right now to really help me, reaching out to parents, pastors, therapists, whatever resources you have close to you. I think it's extremely beneficial for people experiencing stress, which would be all of us at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Not letting it be something that we handle by ourselves. And we are going to talk a little bit about ways that we can do that. But I want to touch on something Pastor Meshach was saying there, which kind of getting to some of the factors that young people face that bring about this stress that we're talking about. I'm going to go back to that survey that we offered to our 50 Academy junior and senior student leaders. I mentioned that they ranked mental health as the #2 topic they wanted to discuss and learn about in their circles. The #1 was actually healthy relationships and how to have those. And that includes, all kinds of relationships, right? So the impact of our friend relationships, familial relationships, dating relationships, and others. And when we also asked them to rank 7 stressors in their life that provides the most stress, the #3 biggest factor by them was friends and peers. so social stress. The number two was the future, which I found really interesting. You know, you're a junior or a senior, maybe nearing the end of high school, approaching college and career decisions, and even just the state of the world perhaps is stressful. And the number one factor from that group was school. And this was in January of this year, which means this is before COVID really took over our lives. And I think since then, school's become even more challenging for most of our young people. And so there are quite a lot of factors that our young people are facing. I want to cite one more thing here and then talk about facing all of these factors. Time magazine in 2016, they ran a cover story. It was titled Anxiety, Depression, and the Modern Adolescent. And in it, they detailed the angst that comes from being a teenager today. And I'm just going to read a short quote from it. It says that they are the post 9/11 generation, raised in an era of economic and national insecurity. They've never known a time when terrorism and school shootings were not the norm. They grew up watching their parents weather a severe recession. And perhaps most important, they hit puberty at a time when technology and social media were transforming society. One expert said, if you wanted to create an environment to churn out really angsty people, we have done it. And again, that took place before a global pandemic hit, which we can add to the list as well. And so when we think about this environment that our young people are today, facing so many factors that can adversely affect our mental well-being, I'm just wondering if each of you might share one major stressor, maybe it's been mentioned, maybe it has not, that you're seeing in the lives of young people, whether as a therapist, a clinician, a pastor, a parent, whatever it may be. What is one stressor that you're seeing? And what would be your encouragement or advice to young people who are struggling with that challenge today? And so, Danny, do you mind first sharing with us something that you're seeing, and maybe the other two could share as well afterwards?
Mm-hmm. Of course. Yeah, so one thing that I think because of the state of the world right now that I've been seeing a lot in young people, as well as older adults and adults as well, but young people, because you're in that stage where you're reaching out, connecting, figuring out who you are, your friends, isolation has really been one of the huge stressors for a lot of young people, where because people that are wanting that sort of social energy and reaching out to groups, they've been feeling like they've been isolated because of the pandemic and how the world looks right now. So because that has been such a huge stressor, my biggest, I guess, recommendation for you is not to be afraid to reach out. I know it's really difficult right now because we're social distancing and all of that, but not to be afraid to reach out and find community online, whether it is setting up a little time for you and your friends to see each other, or setting up a time where you guys see each other from obviously those 6 feet or whatever it may be, to get that sort of social energy, because isolation is something that I think everybody has been experiencing, and it has been hitting everyone in a very particular and similar way because of everything that we've been through. So that's something that reaching out and deciding to tell your parents, like, right now I feel really alone. Is there a way that we could go out and do this? Or your friends, pastors, anyone in the community that's been really wanting to connect. There's a lot of resources out there to connect to online communities that you can go to, and hopefully they'll put some of those at, towards the end. But I definitely recommend you to reach out, because everybody's going through it, and you shouldn't have to go through that alone, because we're all in this together.
Thank you for saying that, Danny. And part of it is just courage to be able to admit, I feel lonely. You know, it is such a brave thing to admit that, and then to process with others how you can address it. So thank you for that. How about Jasmine and Misha? What have you been seeing, and what would be your word of encouragement?
Yeah, just real quick, I think Danny had mentioned something about isolation. And what I've come to realize in this pandemic era was that young people that were already feeling lonely and was already feeling depressed outside of a pandemic, like this just heightened that sense even more. And so what isolation has done is, because, you know, we were created to thrive in community. Like, we're communal people. It's like, it's just part of our makeup. And so when you take that away from somebody who is already feeling depressed or feeling lonely, and that heightened sense of awareness comes upon them, they start to question, you know, their identity. They start to question who they are, and they find themselves in some of the most, you know, to be honest, some of the most darkest places in life. And so this year, definitely have talked to a lot of families and parents who have shared this heightened sense of loneliness for their kids, and they're seeing, some traumatic things take place in their communication with each other, maybe their eating habits and things like that. And so what have I tried to encourage for families is to, similar to what Danny was saying, was like, get out and do something, create spaces that you as a family, those that are within your safe environment as far as considering the social distancing, for you to just spend quality time together. Maybe even journaling and trying to find out what are some of the things that you liked to do aside from what you used to do with your peers. And then starting to get more comfortable of who you are. And then prayerfully at coming out of that, they become stronger for it. But community is definitely something that's missing in this pandemic because of the social distancing, but it's not something that is impossible to create within your own realm of influence or your own home and space.
I think everything that Mishak and Danny just said is very important, especially considering that we are in the position that we are right now and what the world is going through. I will say that another thing that I feel is a stressor for young people, and that I see with my clients, and that I myself have experienced too, and sometimes as adults we experience this, is just kind of working through self-esteem and self-worth. I know young people, you are learning who you are, you're learning about yourself, you're learning about things you enjoy and your friends, and that can sometimes be stressful. And know that, Aaron, you mentioned that peer interactions or social circles is something that we wanted to talk about, or that could be a stressor. And so in our friend groups and in our social media groups, it can be easy to kind of talk badly about ourselves, whether it's because we're comparing ourselves to things that we see in the internet or in the world around us. Sometimes it can be difficult to work through. And so I guess something I would say to that is that first, everyone experiences, everyone works through self-esteem and doubts their self-worth or their value that they have with themselves at some point. We have all been there, and we all continue to go through it at times. And I think that doing things that make us feel good about ourselves are things that help. So things that you enjoy doing, or reaching out to friends and spending time with people that make you feel good about the person that you are. And this is a form of a coping skill, kind of journaling through the thoughts that you're having and kind of putting it, externalizing it. So putting those thoughts that you have somewhere, because they are normal. Yeah, I would say doing things that you enjoy and spending time with the people you enjoy.
And real quick, Jasmine, can I just throw it out there? Because I know there's probably guys listening that says journaling, you mean like a diary? Let me just throw that out there. As a manly man myself, I journal. And I've got about 3 big books that are full of like 10 years of me journaling. So if I can do it, come on, young man, you can do it. And it may be journaling, like, I love what you're saying, because maybe it's not just writing down thoughts. Maybe it's in a form of pictures. Maybe it's in a form of creatively writing something. Maybe you're into rap or songwriting or something, but some form of way of expressing yourself and putting that down on paper definitely does something to help you connect better with the things that you like. And so I just love what you mentioned there as well.
Yes,
really
thank
quick.
you, Misha.
I just wanted to add on really quick something that I always recommend to my clients too, that I find really helpful and relieving. Whenever, let's say, you want to talk to someone and there's a lot of things that you want to tell them, but you necessarily can't because it might hurt them, but you just really want to get them out, writing everything down and ripping it to pieces afterwards, or throwing it away, or burning it obviously in a little safe can, or whatever it may be, just watching that sort of emotional release helps a lot when it comes to saying those things that you might be afraid to say, you can't say to certain people, but write them down. And even if you're not going to say to anyone, it doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to, nobody has to see it. It's just you and you're writing yourself, getting to know yourself, growing, because we continuously do that until the day we die. So really putting those things down and then ripping it to pieces, it causes a lot of release and relief as well. So just a little tip.
Really appreciate it.
if writing isn't for everyone, voice memos on your phone, typing in your notes, typing in your computer, anything that gets the thoughts in your head outside of your head so you can kind of see what's happening helps.
Yeah, thank you for how practical that is too. Really appreciate it. I, as a man much less manly than Pastor Meshach, I will say I journal as well. And it has been a huge blessing in my life. And talking about the need, though, for interaction and community, as a few of you were, something that we often study in high school, and if you haven't, you will definitely study it in college, is this thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of human needs. And it's so interesting because the very foundational need are physical needs, right? So you basically need air to survive, and you need water, you need food. And then after that, it's safety. So you need shelter and protection in order to survive. Those are like the bare bones. The one right after that is community. I mean, that is how integral it is to our survival. And whether you are an introvert or you are shy or you're like, I like being alone, that's great. You need community. And I love the ideas that are presented. And another one is, our phones can actually do more than just text and tweet. They can make what are called phone calls, and you can talk to a person and feel some community that way too. And I know it's not as popular now, but that is something people are rediscovering, the value of a phone call. Like, this is kind of weird, but actually maybe even more intimate and personal than before. So thank you for some of these practical suggestions that you're offering. Something else that is a major factor in the mental well-being of everybody, but especially our young people, is social media. And we know that social media by itself is not good or bad. We're not here to say social media is bad or all social media is good. That's not the case. There's more nuance than that. It really depends on the role we allow it to take in our lives. And so, Jasmine, maybe you can start us off by helping us understand how should young people navigate the world of social media in healthy ways, and why is it important that they do so?
So I would say the healthiest way to go to be involved in social media is to remember that not everything you see is real or true or an accurate depiction of that person's life. The beauty of social media and kind of the detriment to social media is that we pick and choose what people see, and so we can create this picture. And I think going back to the self-esteem and the self-worth, we spend so much time on social media. It's just so easy to have access to. You're waiting in line, you're in the car, you're sitting down on the couch. It's always available. And so it's one click away, but one click away, it also means that we are constantly connected to so many different people's lives. And we may not know that person very well anyway, or we might know them really well. And so the biggest thing with constantly being on social media is that I think that it's natural to kind of compare our life or our experiences. And that's kind of where it becomes a little dangerous, because then we're thinking, oh, I should be this way, or I should be doing this. When in reality, everyone is living their own individual life with their own individual experiences. And so if you're on social media, I think it's just a good reminder to tell yourself that not everything you see is real, whether it's with friends or celebrities or whoever you might be following.
To kind of piggyback on what Jasmine said, which is all very, very important, that's where you decide to set boundaries, right? The things that you want to consume and the things that you decide to leave out of your life, because they directly impact your mental health. Meaning there are people that are going to bring that positive energy, and there are people, because of the things that you're exposed to, things that you've gone through your life, that may have a negative impact on you, and you're still seeing it on a daily basis from people people you don't know, artists, whatever it is. Just know those things that you are not okay with. And if you don't know it, that's okay. Start on that journey on figuring what that is for you, and start setting those boundaries of like, these are the things I want in my life that benefit me, and these are the things that don't, because that is going to make a huge difference. Social media is a sword with, what is the term? Double-edged sword.
Yep.
Yeah, it's great. You can connect, especially if you're not an extrovert. You can connect to community, but at the same time, it could be detrimental depending on the use of it. So, yeah.
And I love what you said, Danny, because boundaries is huge. And I just want to encourage the young people. Look, as an adult, I've learned two great things about social media that I've been able to try to practice in my own life. One, I've learned from my son is that I probably spend more time on social media than my two older boys. And I was tagging one of my sons who's in college, right? And I was like, yo, I had to text him because I was like, hey man, how come you haven't liked any of my tags? I've been sending you videos and memes. Normally you laugh. And he told me, he says, because he has 3 jobs. He's an RA. He works front desk. He does janitorial work too. He switched majors, and he's just dealing with all this workload. He says, Dad, on your phone, it actually has this thing that shows you how much time you have on, how much screen time you spend on. And then there's a place that shows you where you spend most of your screen time on. And he says, I realized I was on IG more than I should have been. And so he says, I decided this week just to get off Instagram so that I can get some things done. And so I was like, ooh, gut check, right? And so that kind of inspired me because our church just finished a 7-day fast last week. And one of the things that we encouraged our church to do was to fast from social media and just take the time off from that. Another young person, one of my young adults in the previous church that I was pastoring, he was walking around with those old Nokia flip phones. Some of you kids out there have no idea what that is. It's a flip phone, and all you could do, and when you texted people, it didn't have letters. You had to text like the number 3 times to say, and just to make sure that so he was walking around with one of those flip phones, and I was like, yo, man, what happened to your iPhone? And he said something that blew me away. He said, check this out. He said, Pastor, I had to downgrade technically to upgrade spiritually. And I was like, oh. And it made me want to throw away my phone. But those are just things that even young people, I want to give you guys credit, man. You guys, there's things that I'm learning from you at the same time that we could share with each other. And I just love that whole concept that you mentioned, Danny, that just there has to be boundaries. We have to set these hard boundaries to make sure that it doesn't affect our mental health.
Absolutely. Yeah. Something so critical is discipline in all areas of life, right? So yes, we want to encourage young people towards community, and social media can provide that. It can provide a beautiful thing in our life, but it is a double-edged sword and it can become harmful as well. And so that's where the maturity of discipline has to come through. And I would also just remind our young people to just do everything you can to stop comparing yourself. I mean that is just to just compare ourselves constantly is so unhealthy. I know that's easier said than done, but if you find yourself doing that, looking at something and immediately comparing yourself, I would encourage you to have the discipline to immediately remind yourself what you love about you and the way God has made you, and to counteract that comparison game that usually doesn't work in our favor. Something that was touched on too that I want to get into a little bit more now is when there can be harmful conduct on social media. Sometimes it comes from us to others, and we think, we're never going to meet this person. We don't even really know this person, so we can say what we want, or maybe we do know them. But we know that when we mistreat people, when we say negative things to people, whether someone we know or a celebrity on social media, it not only negatively affects them, but it actually negatively affects our own well-being and our own mental health. And so we're getting into a conversation about bullying, cyberbullying, and of course, real or in-person bullying. So I'm wondering if Danny, you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about the effect that bullying can have on us and our self-esteem, and maybe what to do if we're facing it. And of course, if either of you else have input on bullying, please share, because this is a really important topic that we face. So Danny, can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh my goodness, I was on mute. I am so sorry. I'll start again. I was saying that really important research has been done where they have correlated depression, anxiety, isolation symptoms when it comes to bullying, because when you have people constantly attacking the way that you look, the things that you do, the people that you hang around with, you're obviously going to start to question yourself. And so self-esteem is definitely tied into all of that. And so I really encourage you guys that whenever that is the case, you definitely reach out, because bullying, unfortunately, is happening to a lot of people, whether that be in person or cyberbullying, especially now with everything being online. A lot of the bullying can also happen through computers, through phones, and honestly, it's even worse because people don't see you face to face, so they feel like they can tell you anything that they want because they don't know you. They don't have, I guess, the guts to tell you in person, so they start saying all these horrific things. So definitely reach out to parents if you don't feel like comfortable, even to a friend, school counselor, pastor, anyone that you could talk to that will be able to help you get connected to not yourself, but if that is God, things that you really like to do to be able to restore that sort of confidence that you have in yourself, because it's very important to do that. There's also the bystander kind of trauma. People that experience bullying also have this, like, quote unquote, not survivor's guilt, because that's more into different type of severe trauma, but this thing of like, oh my gosh, I saw someone being bullied and I didn't do anything about it. So bullying doesn't just affect the person that's being bullied, it affects the person that is bullying and the people that are watching. So it's a social event in itself. So definitely reach out.
Yeah, and sometimes what you realize too is that the bully themselves are the ones that really are suffering with low self-esteem. And that's not to give them an excuse to do it. But I love what you're saying, Danny. It's like when you speak out, and so here's sometimes the reality is that you're probably not the only one that this person is bullying. It's probably something they do on a natural. And if it's something that gets to a point where you need to just speak out on behalf of that, a lot of times other people are waiting for that one person to say something about it before they find the courage to do it as well. And so know that you're not alone, that there's probably other people that are feeling the same way but just don't feel like they have the voice to do so. And that if you could muster up the strength to at least tell one person that you truly trust that can make a difference and to help you out, from there on you'll be able to start a conversation, maybe a form of healing, or steps to even accountability to the one that's doing the bullying as well. And so it's always good to have other people in your side of in your corner to help navigate, to help support, and also to help affirm you, to let you know that, hey, the things that people that don't even know the real you about should not mean as much as what I know what you really are and who you really are.
Everything I think that needed to be said about this, Danny and Mishak got it. If I'm going to emphasize anything, it's that to reach out. You may feel it can be, you would feel scared and alone in those positions, but reaching out and knowing that you're not alone and that there is someone you can trust in your life in those situations, please reach out.
Thank you, guys. How about for our young people who have faced or are currently facing something that is just simply overwhelming? Maybe it's grief, maybe it's trauma that happened recently or a long time ago. Maybe it's an illness such as depression or another mental health challenge. We're getting into some heavier topics here, but what is a young person to do if they are facing something that is just too big to face themselves? Jasmine, maybe you can start the conversation on that and give us some guidance in those heavy situations.
So as we've talked about, we are each experiencing different things in our lives. And so regardless of what we're going through, if you are experiencing something and you're finding it hard to cope, hard to go day to day, there are things you can do for yourself. You can try different coping skills. Some of these coping skills can include exercising. And it doesn't need to be going super, super hard outside in the gym or in the backyard, going for a walk, going on a hike with a friend. You can, like we talked about, journaling, listening to music, things that bring you peace. I think the biggest thing when we are struggling is engaging in self-care. And so in addition to which, I would hope, and well, let me start with that. There are therapists for a reason. I know there is some stigma around therapy and what it might mean and what it is, but therapy is a safe space to talk about and work through things that you are going through in your life. There are pastors that you can reach out to, and there may be other trusted adults that you can talk to. So in addition to reaching out, if you feel that you need something to help you in that moment, little things like these coping skills can really make a big difference. A couple more that I can think of. Well, it's a little easier said than done now, but spending time with someone that you trust and you enjoy being around. I don't know, maybe Danny, you can touch on other coping skills that I'm missing.
Yeah, coping skills that I really recommend for people that are struggling with when it comes to specific trauma or grief. Really spending time with, I know a lot of people are like, whenever you're going through this, it's like, no, I want to push it. I want to push it out. I want to push it out because you don't want to feel everything that you're going through because it's painful. So something that you really need to focus on, I feel like a lot of people go through, especially now with COVID, if people have loved ones or friends that they know that have passed away, really sit with the feeling of like, this happened and me crying and being sad, that's okay. You have to go through that process. Everybody's healing journey is very different. It's not a linear process. Someday you could be okay, the next day it could be terrible, and the next day it could be okay again. It's okay to go through that process, and you have to be compassionate and empathic towards yourself. I cannot emphasize that enough because we're constantly bringing ourselves down, the things that we see all the time. And then when it comes to this healing process, whether that be trauma or grief or whatever it is that you have in your life, knowing that your process is unique to yourself. You should not be comparing. If someone passes away from me and I heal within the next 3 months, that doesn't mean that needs to be you. Some people can take up to 6 months, a year. It also depends how much you're processing that emotion, how much you're processing with people that you care about, how much you're opening up to process those emotions. So really being open to that sort of emotion and allowing yourself to feel everything is extremely important when it comes to that. So yeah, writing down also the things that you're going through, I think it's very beneficial. And once you feel like your healing has done a lot of work, writing about it, and I would really encourage you to compare that and go to the past and be like, wow, this has been my journey. That way you can have something to track and say like, I've come a long way. Whether that takes you 3 days or 6 months, it doesn't matter. It really depends on the person, what you've gone through. Your experience is very unique to yourself, and you should never judge yourself for that.
I was just thinking at the beginning of the year, I had a young man that started to attend my pastor's Bible study. And he was attending for a couple of months. We got really, really close. I had a soft heart for what he was going through because he had some of the similar experiences that I was dealing with as a kid. And you brought up the word coping, right? And he decided to cope with his depression and his pain and some of the trauma that took place in his life through substance abuse. And so half the time that I would talk with him or he'd come, he was either on something or he was sober or just recovering, or it was just so chaotic. And he reached out, and we had some really good conversations. I remember times just dropping him off, my family driving him back home after church, and just praying that, he would just take each day at a time and not try to foresee like what things should look like. Like Aaron mentioned, right? The future is probably the number 2 thing that they were worried about. He's like, well, what does my future look like? I'm a mess up. And, he just constantly kept on putting himself down. And sad to say that he ended up taking his own life through the substance abuse that he was dealing with. Because And I don't know what's going through his mind. I just can only speculate because only he and God knows. But it just must have been a place where he just felt like there was just nothing else that he could do. He was just left without resources, right? It's like, so what do you do? Like, how do you handle situations like that, right? As a pastor, like, they don't teach you this kind of stuff in seminary. I'll be honest with you. There is no book that I could read that can prepare me or their family for something like this. But I do want to say, and I do want to discredit and debunk something that I've seen done in a lot of our church circles, where we've over-spiritualized mental illness, and we've said to young people, just pray about it. And I'm not discrediting prayer at all. But what I'm saying is, yes, pray about it, and then act on that prayer of what God leads you to do about it, or the people that God surrounds you with, because prayer, like it says, faith without works is dead faith. But just praying about it, over-spiritualizing it, I think that has done such a discredit to young people, because we just simply tell them to do one thing, and they says, well, I've been doing that, but nothing has changed. And then we make it feel like, well, maybe your faith isn't strong enough. And that is completely off the charts for me. Because what it is, it's everything that we just talked about. It's not just one thing that we do. It's a variety of things that can help a person's wellness. It is journaling. It is praying. It is finding something that you're excited about, exercising, walking. I do paddleboarding. That's my therapy. I mean, it's a variety. It's not just one simple thing. I think it's everything that we've all been mentioning about that gives a person the best opportunity to try to get over some of the most challenging moments in their life. And so I would just moved in this direction because I still think about him often, if not every day, every other day. And so if you're out there, young people, and you're just listening to this, just understand it's more than just one particular thing. It's a variety of things that we have to do in order to make sure that you're good.
And to really, really quickly, just to end, when it comes to coping mechanisms, coping skills, it's okay if you don't know what you like right now. It's okay if you're figuring that out. Going on the journey of trying to figure what you like and what you don't like is great, because once you have those things, you know that every single time that you're going through something really difficult, you can always resort to that and it'll work. And if it doesn't, then start going on another journey of figuring, okay, I've tried this. This is something that I know every single time that I do it, it always works. It always changes my mood, whether that is talking to someone, going out, hiking, camping. Something that I love doing are vision boards. Put everything that you want to do in your life, whether you think it's accomplishable or whether your parents are like, no, you should do something in the medical field or whatever that is. Put everything that you want to do in your life, with pictures, with poems, with songs, put everything on a board. And that is something that I've even done for myself as an inspiration for me to say, like, these are the things that I really want to accomplish. And you see them every day, right? So it's waking up and seeing the things that you really want to do that really inspires you to take that step every single day. So yeah.
Yeah, and maybe it's a hybrid. Like, so I love what you're saying too, because maybe it's a prayer journal, right? So maybe it's praying, but you're journaling. And I love, you just mentioned it earlier, right? Writing down, like, I date things that I like. I do like a prayer journal and I put a date on it, and then I put a little box next to it. And then some of these boxes that I have to check off, I have to go back a year or two when that prayer finally gets answered. And it's so rewarding when you could go back and be like, oh, that prayer's answered. And you got to flip through that journal 2 years behind. You're like, check, right? And so just feeling a sense of accomplishment of checking, even if it's the smallest thing, it's rewarding. And it's a goal, and it gives you meaning and purpose just to look forward to the next day when that gets answered, right? And I'm telling you that because it might not be today or tomorrow. It might be, like I'm saying, 2 years from now, but at least you have something to strive for and hope for and look back to see the reward and the drive that kept you going.
Thank you for saying that, Pastor Meshach. And well, all of you are sharing. I mean, this is, I think, a conversation that could go for 3 hours. We don't have too much time left. I do want to touch on a couple of other things. And I also want to acknowledge the comments that are coming in, which are so helpful. there was a moment where several of them were listing their own coping ideas, and some said drawing, some said taking a walk, listening to music, prayer, journaling. These are great ideas. Thank you for sharing that. But something that was briefly mentioned was therapy and seeing a counselor, and how scary that can be, or even whether that is in God's will. Is it okay to see a therapist as opposed to seeing your pastor or reading your Bible? And again, we don't have a lot of time, but I'm wondering if any of you are just willing to share your either thoughts on seeing a counselor or maybe even your own experience. And I'm not going to direct it towards anybody specifically, but are any of you willing to share your thoughts on seeing a therapist to talk to?
I could start. I believe that, not everybody needs therapy. It's something very personal, something that you have to decide to go through. I do encourage it for everyone, whether that is with a partner eventually in your life. You want to do couples therapy, you want to do individual therapy. Family therapy is very, very helpful for family dynamics, communication. But I have personally gone to therapy myself. I think it's something that is extremely important. They always encourage therapists to have therapists because you are processing so much stuff and you're gathering people's information. Especially if you're a pastor or a counselor, you need to be able to let that go with someone, whether that is obviously a friend is very helpful, but someone that is really trained. Pastors are experts when it comes to connecting that on your spiritual health. When it comes to counselors, we have background and training when it comes to specifically dealing with these emotions that you're going through, especially if it's any sort of trauma or any sort of anxiety that you're dealing with. We are specifically trained and study a lot actually to go through these processes and be able to sit with you, because every single response that we give to you, it's always very purposeful and very meaningful. Whether you think like it's not doing anything, we really ask you questions and really respond to you in ways that either will make you feel okay, either make you feel better, or just make you start to question things that you were like, maybe I had that in the past. It was not very good for me. It was very difficult. How can I deal with it now? And how can I start to process that now? So reaching out is very important. I know it can be really scary. I know there's a lot of stigma around it, but I'm really glad that we're having this conversation and this platform, because I think it's very, very important for you guys to feel like we are not something unreachable. You can definitely talk to us. Most of my clients are kids. Most of my experience has been with kids. And so I love touching in base with people of all ages, but kids are definitely something that I love working with. And I think Jasmine has also had a very similar experience. So we're very grateful when you guys reach out. I know it sounds very scary, but we're here to listen to you and talk about the difficult things that maybe you can't talk to some people about.
So just to piggyback off what Danny said, I have definitely been to therapy myself. I've had a few different therapists, because the reality is sometimes you don't like your therapist. And I'll tell you right now, that's okay. Sometimes it could take a couple tries to find someone that you really click with and feel comfortable talking to. So I have been in therapy for a long time, for just also as a professional, like Danny said, but also just to work on my own relationships in my life, because I want that help and I want that support. And like Danny said, it's kind of scary to go in thinking, oh, I don't know this person. And that's normal. And it's also really nice sometimes to talk to someone that doesn't know anything about you. It can go both ways, right? But as far as a therapist, I can speak as a therapist that we have, as Danny said, we are specific to working with different types of trauma, and we have training, I'm sure Pastor Mishak has, just in different areas. And so our roles are based on the fact that we are trained and have knowledge in different areas.
And I think that's important what you just mentioned, because I think, and I'm just speaking in general, because I get a lot of members and families that come to seek counsel from me. As a pastor, I'm only able to give you spiritual counseling. Like, I can't give you sort of a professional assessment of what you need. And so I always give them the spiritual counseling that they need, and then I will refer them to maybe a family therapist. It says, maybe you should talk to this person who has more skills and has gone to school and has a professional background in those areas that I'm completely oblivious to. Because I think if pastors take on that role, we actually can do more damage to people than we could at referring them to people like yourselves and like Danny and Jasmine, who that is your profession, that is your calling, that is your ministry. And that's also part of the work of the church, is that it's not always just on the pastor to give you these type of advices, but it's also for us to help navigate and direct you to the resources that are available, right? And just to throw it out there, yeah, I've been through a few therapy sessions, and I've realized that through those therapy sessions that there was some issues that I was dealing in some of the relationships that I had as a kid that has kept me from really feeling liberated and free from a lot of these anxieties and pressures and stressors that I felt, that I had no idea that it was something that that was so minor that happened to be when I had an argument, whether with a sibling or a parent or something somebody said, that I was able to finally get help from, and afterwards I felt liberated. I felt it was just like a burden lifted off my chest. And it was also frustrating because I was thinking to myself, like, what took me so long to actually get out there and seek help? And so, again, Aaron, for the manliest of manlies and less manliest therapy is also something that even men do as well. Just want to throw it out there for the guys, all right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that means that all four of us have experienced and benefited from seeing therapists. I know I certainly have, and I want to thank you for your vulnerability. We just have a couple minutes left. I want to get to one last question. Before I do that, I do just briefly want to touch back to Pastor Meshach. Thank you for sharing what you did about the young man that you knew who is no longer with us. We know that's not easy to talk about, but it is important too. So just if there are any young people right now are having any struggles with suicidal thoughts, perhaps, Danny, can you mention the resource or where those young people should go if they are ever struggling with that, or know somebody who is? Where should they reach out to for that?
Yes, of course. So when it comes to suicide, I just want to encourage you guys, at any point in your life, if you ever experience it, I think it's something that everyone at some point does experience, unfortunately. And so there's no shame in that. Please don't feel like you need to hold back or not tell anyone, because the more you talk about it, the more we normalize it, and the better it is to communicate. So you can also always reach out to the National Suicide Hotline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can speak to a counselor there anonymously. They don't need to know your background or anything like that. You have the opportunity to talk to them about what you are going through. There's also the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, where you can actually chat with them. If you don't want to call them because you're too shy, that is okay. You can still text them or chat with them through their website, and they'll be able to still talk to you, process anything that you might be going through. And if I'm not mistaken, it's not there on the screen, but it's suicidepreventionlifeline.org.
Yeah, we have it on the screen.
It's on
That's
okay.
the website. I'm sorry.
The website,
Go
sorry. Yeah, suicidepreventionlifeline.org. I can put that in the chat, or maybe someone can put that in the chat. They'll be able to chat with you. If you're too scared sometimes to talk to the phone, that's okay. They're still there to help you.
Thank you so much. Sorry for that interruption, Danny. Thank you for saying that and sharing that. Really appreciate it. In our last minute, okay, I just want to finish each of you just sharing one way that you practice self-care. I think this would be a great way for us to finish. Self-care is so important. How we take care of ourselves, really pour into our hearts and our lives. So we did talk about coping skills, which sometimes can be similar, but self-care is a little bit different. It's not just coping with grief. This is actually how we pour into ourselves and love ourselves with self-care. So again, just in 1 minute, maybe each of you share in just a few seconds one of your favorite methods of self-care. Pastor Meshach, you kick us off.
Yeah, so I started this. Well, actually, I got this from Pastor John Ciccarelli. I used to work out a lot, and he one time commented on my post, and he says, "Hey, press and pray." And I took that and I made that a hashtag. because he likes to work out too. He's into CrossFit. So I started sort of this press and pray movement hashtag, and I tag a bunch of our young people. My sons are part of it, some of their friends. And so every time we're at the gym, every time we're working out, every time we're doing something that is a physical activity, we'll put a hashtag press and pray, and we'll tag everybody that we can that wants to get this movement going. That's one thing that I was able to do. But since the pandemic and they closed the gym down, I still kept the P, and it's something that I've always done for the past couple years. And that's every Friday, I'm very consistent on making sure I get out in the ocean and I paddleboard. And so it's paddle and pray. And so I go out there a few times with Pastor Ruben from La Mesa and Pastor Will and a couple of the other young pastors out there. We'll meet out there. And self-care is us getting out there on the water early in the morning, paddling out under the bridge and just sitting in a circle and just talking about life. And so that has been something that has been so therapeutic, been so good, and a blessing, and especially in these past couple of months during COVID.
Thank you, Pastor. I love that. How about you, Jasmine?
I would say right now, the two most important self-cares that I have been doing regularly is I make sure to FaceTime at least one friend each week, if not a friend, a family member. I know, as we talked about in these hard times, feeling connected sometimes is a lot harder to do than it was before. So I make sure that I have, that form of connection. And also making sure that Sundays I have a certain amount of time by myself. Because for all those extroverts out there, if you find yourself feeling tired at the end of the day and like you don't have enough energy and you're just a little irritable, maybe give yourself some time to be alone and kind of reboot.
So for me, kind of piggybacking on what Jasmine said, I do take my self-care very seriously. I know sometimes we can neglect it, but the only way you can project that energy is to be able to refill yourself with that energy, right? So a way that I love doing that, I love to either Fridays or Sunday mornings or Friday nights. What I do is I'm a huge skincare fanatic, junkie. I believe investing in myself is investing in my mental health. So I love taking care of my skin, my hair too, but my skin, I'm a big one. And so I usually do face masks for my hair, for my face. I tend to do exfoliation on my body. So taking care of myself in that way. I'm a huge music person, so I have playlists for different moods for whenever I need to feel a certain way or get myself out of a certain emotion that I'm going through or something that's going on. Music's also very important for me. So those two things are my main go-tos.
Thank you guys for sharing. Actually, I heard Pastor Mishak does the face masks as well with the cucumbers on his eyes.
Awesome.
I heard he does that regularly. So I love it. I love it. For me, I really love playing basketball. Any Pathfinders out there, if you ever want to challenge me to a game of basketball, go for it. You will lose, but that's okay. Can't do it as much during COVID right now, but even just putting up some shots by myself is good for my mental health and well-being, and this conversation has been as well. So thank you so very much. It is the end of our time to talk about these things, but it is not the end of time for our Pathfinders to talk about these things. Please, Pathfinders, make stress and mental health a regular topic of discussion with your family, your friends, in your prayers, and maybe even with a trusted adult, such as a teacher, a pastor, or a counselor. And thank you so very much to our panel members. We certainly couldn't have done this without you. We're really grateful for each of you. So thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you who have watched and have interacted during our discussion. We appreciate you all so much. And I think that's a nice transition into a few more prizes that we want to give away. Okay, so I'm going to announce our next group of prize winners here. We've got 6 of them. Oh man, 6 of them. Okay, so real quick, a portable USB flexible touch light. Portable USB flexible touch light is going to Julian Villafuerte. Congratulations. A $10 Starbucks gift card is going to go to Mackenzie Wheeler. A hammock. Cool. You can do some hammock stacking with that. A hammock is being awarded to Socorro Resendiz. And again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Socorro Resendiz. A cell phone stand is going to Abdi Areli Torres. Congratulations. A laptop phone ring light. We've got another one of those to give out. Those are awesome. Congratulations to Paula Mendoza. Paula Mendoza. And one more $10 Starbucks gift card. Congratulations to Martin Nunez. Congrats to our prize recipients. Thank you to all of you for being a part of our Camporee and part of this all-important discussion. We are grateful. Right now, we are going to send you off to your dinner time. Avatar Adventures will be open as well. And then we invite you to be back here at 6:15 p.m., where we'll be checking in again with our Pioneer camping crew and closing out our program and hearing from Pastor Meshach again. 6:15 back here. Until then, enjoy yourselves. God bless you.